Good evening. My name is Sanan Saleh, and last week, Elon Musk, billionaire CEO of SpaceX, Tesla, X, and what I can only assume is a stealth startup, announced that Twitter would ban the use of the terms decolonization and from the river to the sea, stating that they are euphemisms that necessarily imply the genocide of the Israeli people. Now, before we get to that, let's first take a moment to mourn the real victim here, Elon Musk. I mean, this is the guy who spent $44 billion, the Pakistani equivalent these days of about 5 liter petrol, claiming that it was the cost of protecting free speech. And to be fair, Elon has exercised that freedom on many occasions. Like earlier that week, when he publicly endorsed an anti-Semitic tweet that accused Jewish communities of spreading, and I quote, racism against white people. Now, when companies like Apple, IBM, and Disney began pulling their ads from Twitter in lieu of Musk's anti-Semitism, his response was to throw the $44 billion worth of free speech out the window and resort to blanket censorship. They say you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become Pembroke. Well, let's talk about these euphemisms, shall we? If decolonization can be a euphemism for genocide, what words can't be a euphemism for genocide? Independence? Liberation? Sovereignty? Freedom? What words are you left with then? Uncolonization? Colonization uno reverse? Equating decolonization to genocide is as contrived of a conspiracy theory as saying Pepsi stands for pay each penny, save Israel. Which is so dumb, because as we all know, Pepsi actually stands for we're all out of Coca-Cola. Now, a variety of right-wing groups argue that the slogan from the river to the sea clearly calls for Israel's destruction, but that's simply not true. The phrase was popularized in the 1960s as a call for a democratic, secular Palestine, where Palestinians were free from oppression. After all, the slogan goes, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, not from the river to the sea, Palestine will be an apartheid state, run an open-air prison, cut off 2.3 million people's access to food, water, electricity, crush Jewish protests for peace, kill 40 journalists, murder 100 UN personnel, slaughter 15,000 innocent civilians, including 6,000 children, by dropping 25,000 tons of explosives, the equivalent of not 1, but 2 nuclear bombs on homes, hospitals, and refugee camps, then you could say that the slogan implies genocide. But until then, the only thing implying genocide is, and this is just my opinion, the actual f***ing genocide. But here's the thing. There's no denying that anti-Semitism is a real problem. And it's true that anti-Semitic people like, say, Elon Musk, have used this slogan as a battle cry. It's no secret that Hamas has used this slogan to hijack the aspirations of the Palestinian people and commit brutal acts of violence. But you can't judge a slogan based on how a minority of people use it. In fact, you could take literally any slogan in the world, and if you give it to the wrong person in the wrong context, you can make pretty much anything sound bad. Don't believe me? Well, I have proof. Take Disneyland's slogan, the happiest place on earth. Wholesome, cute, magical, makes you feel all warm and fuzzy. Now, if you keep the slogan and replace Disneyland with, say, North Korea, it still kind of works, but for all the wrong reasons. Airbnb slogan, belong anywhere, apt, witty, but don't say it in a refugee camp. Red Bull gives you wings, but you don't want to hear that as you board a PIA flight. Or take one of the most popular slogans in the world, Nike's Just Do It. It is so good, simple, inspirational, perfect for a sports brand. Or any brand. Actually, you can take any catchphrase, and if you put it in front of a picture of any maniac, it will almost always work. Ariel, to ho jaye muqabla. McDonald's, I'm loving it. Sprite, Thandi Rakh. Pepsi, why not, Meri Jaan? Lexus, the relentless pursuit of perfection. Now, hopefully it's clear by now that words and phrases are just that, words and phrases. They can mean nothing or everything based on the context in which they're used. And when you ban words like decolonization and slogans that aspire for freedom and peace, you don't just take it away from the bigots. You take it away from every Palestinian praying for peace. You take it away from people begging for a ceasefire because their lives have been shattered by this violence. And more so, when you take away these words, what words do you leave them with? Whose vocabulary can they use now? Hamas's? Netanyahu's? Elon Musk's? What words do they use to aspire for freedom? And speaking of freedom, here's the important distinction that people like Netanyahu and his cabinet of crazies don't want you to know. Freedom for Palestinians does not equate to the persecution of the Israelis. In fact, freedom of any people does not require the subjugation of another. Yes, it does require the breakdown of systems of oppression. Yes, it does require the reckoning of fascist, power-hungry leaders that derive power from division. And yes, it most certainly does require difficult conversations about painful matters. But saying that these terms imply genocide is A, almost impressively ignoring the literal genocide that is happening as we speak, and B, setting a dangerous precedent that presents a distorted, zero-sum view of the world in which freedom is a scarce resource that two groups of people simply cannot share. Like kulfi ice cream. I don't care what anyone has to say. I'm not sharing my kulfi. It's disgusting, it's filthy, get your own. But in reality, freedom is ubiquitous. To continue the rather crude dessert analogy, freedom is like a delicious barfi. You can take a bite, pass it around, and everyone can get diabetes together. But the worst crime people like Netanyahu's government and Hamas have committed is their control over the people's narrative. Not only have they disregarded an unending list of international laws, but they have hijacked the pain, suffering, and trauma of millions of Palestinians and Jews. Use that to rebrand their own fascist, selfish motives and commit atrocities that are anything but Palestinian, anything but Jewish, and certainly anything but human. See you next week.